All right. Hello, 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 and welcome to Nursing News You Can Use live at 5. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. Thanks for tuning in this week on this July 30th, 2025, our last July day of July, our last broadcast for July until we start in August. Then I want to say that next week, August the 6th, we will not have a live program. I just want to let you know I'll be doing something else. Unfortunately, that I will not have a live program next week. So it'll be the following week. So August the 6th, no live program, but that's okay. That's all right. We'll be back with the news for you then. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our affirmation for today. This is from the You Are a Badass calendar from Jen Sincero. And it says, you can't screw up so majorly that your badassery disappears. It's who you are. It's who you always will be. It's not up for negotiation. So hold on to your badassery and keep striving forward. Okay, let's get into the news. We got a few things to cover for today as I am now knocking everything off on my desk. All right, here we go. That's back where it goes. All right, let's go to our first news story. Okay, this is coming out of Topeka, Kansas, and it says from KSNT, I'm going to defund this board. Kansas lawmakers are unsatisfied with the Board of Nursing. As Kansas continues to deal with the nursing shortage, health professionals are placing some of the blame on the state. The Kansas Nursing Board manages nursing licenses in the Sunflower State. They also discipline nurses who they believe are practicing without a license. However, some health professionals believe they're being wrongfully accused. And this is what I have to say. This just on the whole thing of nursing boards, just so you know, there really is no due process. Okay? Nurses really don't get due process when they go before the nursing board. So it's more of a, yeah, you're before the board, and it's just sometimes it's how the board feels. I mean, there's just no, from what I've observed, it's really difficult for you to, unless you have a really good attorney, for you to win against the board, because it's just basically, you know, I don't know, mean girls on steroids. It just seems like they, but that's just me. Anyway, let's go on with the story. So, here's what it says. During Tuesday's Government Oversight Committee, lawmakers spent the afternoon discussing the Board of Nursing. There, several nurses testified that, I'm sorry, some of it was cut off. So it says this label stays on their record, and several nurses testified that it's preventing them from getting jobs in the nursing industry, despite Kansas dealing with a growing shortage of health professionals. Under the unprofessional conduct, so this is what they're alleging, that they had unprofessional conduct, demerit can be given to a nurses, and it says one nurse, former nurse in Kansas State Representative Sadie Pickard said at a Tuesday meeting, and she also testified against the nursing board. It says one person was late in filing her relicensure paperwork because her husband had cancer. One nurse did her relicensure online in a timely manner, but simply missed a click on her computer. She has been through the ringer. It is costing her thousands of dollars, and her patients suffer tremendously. 3 representatives for the Kansas Nursing Board were present during Monday's meeting after hearing testimonies from Kansas nurses. The Government Oversight Committee questioned the Nursing Board and grew frustrated with their lack of ability to explain these cases. Carol Moreland, the executive administrator of the Kansas Board of Nursing, acknowledged the complaints made against the board and explained that it was never the board's intention to cause any harm. So wait a minute, let's take a pause there, because then it makes me have another thought. So if most of our nurses are on the nursing board, and what they're doing is causing harm to other nurses, would that be unprofessional conduct? Just saying. And again, they do they do an important job. I've sat in a few of those hearings. You know, there are nurses that are out there that are habitual offenders, and it's surprising that they even manage to keep their license. Okay, so I get it, they do a hard job, don't get me wrong, but I also know that there are some that go rogue, and my question is, who's keeping tabs on those things? So anyway, let's go on. Additionally, another nursing board representative claimed that a lack of staffing makes it difficult to notify nurses when their licenses are about to expire. So again, now they're saying they don't have enough staff either. However, lawmakers were still left frustrated, with one going as far to say, "I'm going to defund this board." The Kansas State Nursing Board is asking for more than $4 million from the state in 2026. The agency also receives revenue from licensing fees. So there's more to the story. You can head on over to the Capitol Bureau News and Nexstar Media to get that. But it's kind of interesting. What is your take on that? Let me know, because, like I said, um, I've heard some horror stories from nurses that have gone before the board for frivolous things, and anyone can make a complaint against you. That's the crazy thing, and so I just know that it's difficult. Thankfully, there are some attorneys that specialize in this to help protect nurses. But what do you guys have to say? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Okay, here's another hard and difficult story to talk about in healthcare. This is another instance of violence against healthcare workers. This is coming out of Rochester, New York. And it says Monica Scott was working Thursday night in the emergency department at Highland Hospital when she received an alert for a person in need. We originally got the call, the MERT response, for someone in the parking garage, and I was literally running around the parking garage trying to find where the person was. Security was in the parking garage and also just circling around the parking garage trying to find who we're looking for. Scott said that's when one of the nurses received an update on the alert. One of the responding nurses had gotten the call, so the call was made from her phone to someone in the hospital that she had been assaulted outside. So then we all came outside, and it was just a huge response, Scott said. Rochester police said staff members flagged officers down on the Rockingham Street just off hospital grounds. There was blood just all over, Scott said. It was on her phone, it was on her badge, it was all over her uniform. Even though they worked separate shifts, Scott said she knew the nurse was a well-respected woman who had worked for years at Highland. She only had 2 weeks left, and this is unfortunately how she got to experience her last couple of weeks of nursing. In a statement, the hospital said the nurse was treated for injuries and released. We thank Highland Safety and Security officers in the Rochester Police Department for responding swiftly to the physical assault of a Highland employee Thursday evening near the hospital. The employee was treated for injuries and has been released. The safety of Highland patients, visitors, and employees remain a top priority, and we are cooperating fully with law enforcement efforts to apprehend and prosecute the perpetrator of this assault. We're taking all necessary measures to ensure a safe and secure environment for everyone at Highland and remain dedicated to providing compassionate care. So it said, Scott said the whole ordeal has left her speechless. Literally gives me chills to think I just could have walked outside after leaving work and been assaulted by this person. Police said the attack was related to a dispute between a patient in the hospital and other staff members. And I say that as there's an incident that I'm not going to talk too much about because it involves a place where I work. There's an incident, and fortunately, no one was injured in this incident. But it just makes me think about the violence that is escalating against healthcare workers, and it's only getting worse. And it's sort of like the same with the school related violence with the pew-pews. Thoughts and prayers and warm wishes, and we're gonna keep you safe, attaboy. Things just ain't working. It's not working. So there's got to be something that changes. And if you have any ideas, let us know. Let's share it in the comments. Okay. Thoughtful ideas. Okay. We do not promote violence on the channel, so thoughtful ideas. Okay. Just want to put that out there as well. All right. So let's get on to our next story. This is coming from McKnight's Long-Term Care News, and it says judge to decide whether chain owner is an employer in nursing home overtime case. So let's think about this because there's issues related to this, and then we've talked about this issue before, but let's see what this has to say. So a Southeastern nursing home chain has asked a federal judge to dismiss a case in which a nurse that worked for one of its 27 facilities is fighting for overtime pay. At issue is whether the chain should be considered her actual employer. A judge is set to hear arguments Wednesday morning, that's today, from Harbor View Health Systems, which is angling for dismissal, and licensed practical nurse Crystal Delk, a former hourly worker at a Harbor View facility who is seeking certification of a class action claim. Interesting. Delk sued Harborview last year, alleging she often worked more than 40 hours a week without receiving overtime pay at the rate of time and a half as required by federal law. In her lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court of Eastern District of New York, Delk noted that the company also failed to pay those higher rates to other directly hired frontline workers while nonetheless paying time and a half to agency nurses. Wait a minute, I thought she was okay. Let me take a step back. So she's actually working for the company and not agency. Let's delve into this because I react to these things in real time with y'all. So let's look into it. So Harborview operates facilities in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. According to a lawsuit, Delk worked at the 100-bed Harborview Rome in Georgia until at least 2023. For its part, New York-based Harborview is arguing that Delk's claim fails to prove the company was her employer because she did not demonstrate that fact through 4 legal tests required by the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA. The complaint contains no facts that indicate that the defendant has any direct role in determining plaintiff's working hours, Harborview's attorneys wrote. Moreover, plaintiff's vague and conclusory allegation about HHS's authority does not aver that HHS actually determined the rate and method of pay as to any individual. Okay. So Delk's attorneys, however, point to the FLSA definition of employer as having striking breadth as referred to the Supreme Court. They told the court that Harborview facilities shared centralized back office operations, including human resources, accounting, marketing, financial operations, and legal compliance. Harborview also exercised common control over the employees of its facilities, including setting employment policies and pay practices, as well as recruiting, hiring, and retention of employees. So, in other words, the home office centralized all the HR pretty much, according to this. So, Magistrate Judge James R. Cho will take those arguments into consideration, but he also told Harborview to provide more clarity as to who actually hired Delk. In setting the hearing date, he warned the defendant should come prepared to advise the court who it believes was the plaintiff's employer. Delk is seeking overtime compensation, liquidated damages equal to that overtime award, and interest and court costs. She's also pushing for a jury trial that would expand repayment and potential damages to all Harborview Health Systems nurse employees in the past 3 years who were paid straight time for overtime. So we'll see what happens to this in Harborview, and we'll keep an eye on this case because this could be very important for the rest of us. So, in other words, she worked for one of their facilities, and the parent organization feels like, well, we're not responsible for this. Well, then who is, sir? Who is? Because, it probably said Harborview on everything that they signed, right? I mean, I would bring in like every policy, whatever else I had my hands on. I said, it sounds like Harborview was the one that ran everything according to what the article just said. So who's in charge? If they have centralized human resources and you're covering the human resources for all those facilities, who's in charge? Okay. All right, let's take a brief break and we'll get right back to our next one. Hey, Aaron. That's my niece. Thanks for tuning in. Yes, and public safety is terrifying. It can be, but there's something, you know what? You just got to keep pushing. Let's take a brief break. Ready to turn your nursing skills into a thriving business? At the Nurse Shark Academy, we give you expert strategies, real startup guidance, and the support to go from employee to empowered entrepreneur. Join us and build the nurse-owned business of your dreams. Start today and join us at the nursesharkacademy.biz. All right, let's get into our next story. And this is coming from 6 News in Richmond, and it says, Leadership changes impact VDH office responsible for inspecting nursing homes and hospitals. The Virginia Department of Health, or VDH, has confirmed a leadership shakeup within its office responsible for regulating healthcare facilities, the Office of Licensure and Certification. The OLC licenses facilities, including hospitals and nursing homes, and ensures their ongoing compliance with care and safety standards through inspection and investigations. VDH says it's focused on process improvements moving forward, but the changes have sparked concerns and a protest resignation from another high level leader in the OLC. During a Joint Commission on Health Care meeting last week, a lawmaker asked State Health Commissioner Dr. Karen Shelton where OLC Director Kim Beasley was. Is Kim Beasley in the room by any chance? Asked Senator Christopher Head, our Republican from West Virginia. She's not with us today, Shelton responded. It would later be learned that Beasley, I think it's Beasley, is no longer in her position after serving as OLC director since 2020. Overall, she has worked at the agency for more than 30 years. BDH spokesperson Maria Repas said Beasley has moved to a newly created role as a senior policy advisor. In this position, she will play a critical role in advising the commissioner and other senior VDH leaders on healthcare facility policy and regulation. Repas said, okay, that's not suspicious. Okay. In a statement, REPA said VDH is keeping an eye towards change management and process improvement while focusing on strategic planning, enhanced recruitment and retention efforts of medical facility inspectors, and a pointed interest in providing the utmost support to the current team at OLC. The change comes amid a challenging time for the office, as CBS 6 has covered in previous investigations. With a 42% vacancy rate of inspectors, according to Shelton, the OLC has struggled to respond to complaints and complete timely inspections, also called surveys, of nursing homes. Family members of nursing home residents previously expressed concerns about how long it took the agency to investigate the complaints they submitted. As of Tuesday, federal data shows Virginia has the second highest percentage in the country of nursing facilities overdue for routine inspection, a statistic that Democratic U.S. Senators from Virginia, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, who allot federal funding for oversight efforts to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, called unacceptable. Beasley has previously told lawmakers that the short staffed OLC is dealing with an overwhelming workload, as well as the volume of people complaining about nursing home care and conditions has grown significantly year over year. That is one of the main reasons causing us to be late on our federal surveys and state licensure inspections is the number of complaints has skyrocketed, Beasley said during a General Assembly Committee meeting earlier this year. Last week, Shelton presented data to the Joint Commission on Healthcare showing OLC had already received more nursing home complaints so far in 2025 than it did in all of 2024. She also stated that the OLC has reduced the average interval between standard nursing home inspections from 37 months to 22 months. The federal requirement is for facilities to be inspected at least once every 16 months, so they're still not meeting the federal standard. During the same commission meeting, Senator Head, who runs a home health care business licensed by OLC, praised Beasley for her ability to manage the office given the circumstances. That's interesting. She has thinned the whitewash about as thin as it can get. She's doing everything she can and doesn't have enough resources, Head said. She can't get it done without the resources that were given her. Almost immediately after the leadership change, another OLC leader, Melissa Green, who oversaw the nursing home division, resigned. Green, who had decades of experience operating nursing homes, joined the OLC as the Division of Long-Term Care Services Director last year. In a resignation letter, she recalled the, quote, recent removal. So this is what happened. I knew there was something about, I was like, there's something, I kind of saw some fishy. So it wasn't like she left of her own volition. According to this, she was removed from her position deplorable. Green cited, quote, ongoing concerns related to organizational changes and an unsustainable workload and inexperienced leadership that will be a detriment to the entire office and progress that is made the past year. She added new leadership has caused a quote a lack of consistent guidance, decision making transparency, and operational understanding. In other words, they brought in somebody new and they don't know what they're doing and they're just making up their own stuff. I get it. Okay. She credited Beasley for multiple accomplishments, including implementing a licensure portal, requesting a workforce compensation study resulting in pay increases, and advocating to get legislation passed that will increase licensing fees and help OLC hire more inspectors. When asked for a response to Green's letter, Repas declined to comment further, citing personnel information prohibited from disclosure. Meanwhile, an official with Governor Youngkin's administration dismissed the letter as coming from, quote, a disgruntled employee. Amy Hewitt, spokesperson for the Virginia Health Care Association, which represents the interests of nursing facilities across the state, said the organization maintains a collaborative relationship with OLC. Quote, since an effective survey process is a critical part of ensuring nursing homes are providing a high quality care to their residents. She also acknowledged the struggle in recent years due to significant backlog in standard surveys, but she said VHCA was encouraged by the progress OLC made in reducing the backlog over the past year. Leadership changes at OLC raises concerns as the Youngkin administration approaches the end of its term. The loss of institutional knowledge and depth of understanding of the survey process and regulations with the departures of key personnel will almost certainly have a negative impact at a time when substantial progress is still needed. Unfortunately, the Youngkin administration has not taken enough steps to address understaffed and underpaid survey teams, Hewitt said in a statement. So we'll see what happens, but hey, we'll keep an eye on that story. If you're in that area and you know what's going on, hey, give us a shout out and let us know what's happening. All right, so let's go to a few stories that are actually out of the country. But first, let's get to this one on United Healthcare because, we just can't leave them alone. They're always in the news. Let's talk about it. So, Healthcare Finance News reports United Health to leave certain Massachusetts markets, affecting 600,000 enrollees. Due to higher than expected medical costs, United Healthcare will exit certain Medicare Advantage plans, according to the information released Tuesday on the Q2 earnings call. Without giving details of which markets would be affected, United Healthcare CEO Tim Knowles said, additionally, and unfortunately, given these pressures, we've made the difficult decision to exit plans that currently serve over 600,000 members, primarily in less managed products such as PPO offerings. The company is taking similar approaches for its Medicare Supplement, Group Medicare Advantage, and standalone Part D plan pricing for next year. The increase in care activity across individual and group Medicare Advantage plans seen earlier this year has not affected complex populations and its Medicare supplement business, he said. Our current view for 2025 reflects $6.5 billion more in medical costs than we anticipated in our initial outlook. We will be watching the market closely as the 226 Medicare offerings become public so we can better assess our market position and respond quickly. When the company When the company prepared its 2025 Medicare Advantage offerings back in the first half of 2024, it significantly underestimated the accelerating medical trend and did not modify its benefits or plan offerings to offset the financial pressure. This factor was compounded by a number of Massachusetts plan exits and also the extent to which it now sees providers placing further service intensity into the healthcare system. Most of the pressure, about 70%, is coming from physician and outpatient care, while inpatient utilization has also accelerated. We continue to see our utilization increases in ER and observation stays and consistently see more services being offered and bundled as part of each ER visit and clinical encounter. In short, most encounters are intensifying in services and costing more. United Healthcare initially assumed a Medicare Advantage medical cost trend of just over 5% when configuring its 2025 bids. The full year 2025 trend is now at 7.5%. So there's more to this, but you want to hear about it, head on over to that story. Healthcare Dive News. All right. So let's get to this one. I'm going to head on over across the pond, as we say. This is from Reuters. It says Nigerian nurses strike for pay and staffing as talks collapse. From Lagos, nurses in Nigeria's public hospitals began a 7-day warning strike on Wednesday, demanding, excuse me, there we go, improved remuneration, more money, better working conditions, and increased recruitment after a 2-week ultimatum to the government expired without resolution. The National Association of Nigerian Nurses and Midwives warned that if their demands are not met by next week, the union will embark on an indefinite strike, the first in over 2 decades. Well, we hope that before the 7th day, we'll have attention and positive response from the federal government, said Christina Adebobi, head of the Nurses and Midwives Union in Lagos. A meeting on Tuesday between the union and the government delegation by the labor minister, Mohammed Dinyati, ended in a stalemate. When you look at the composition of the meeting, it already shows that no outcome could have been gotten out of that meeting, said Todd Adamuso, union secretary in Lagos. And I apologize to any of those, Toba. If I mispronounce your name, please forgive me. It's not intentional. So it says the impasse underscores a growing rift between healthcare workers and the government, leaving patients vulnerable as hospitals brace for further disruptions. The union is pushing for the recruitment of more nurses, pointing to a sharp decline in personnel as over 42,000 nurses have left Nigeria for jobs abroad in the past 3 years. And again, we've talked about this before about the drain of talent in other countries, and some of these countries, and they're coming over to the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada for better wages and things like that. And it's leaving their home country then without enough staff as well. So as we use immigrants to help with our staffing matter, or at least we did, I don't know what's going on now, we did, now that's leaving some problems. And so even now they're recruiting from the U.S. to Canada. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on that as long as we get the information to you. But if you are in that area, let me know what's going on. If you're in Nigeria and you're around and you're a nurse there, hey, let me know what's happening. All right. So here's our other story. This is really sad. This is from the New York Times. It is coming out about what's happening in Gaza. And it says, no meals, fainting nurses, dwindling baby formula, starvation haunts Gaza hospitals. And several of the hospitals still function in Gaza. Nurses are fainting from hunger and dehydration. Managers often cannot provide meals for patients or medical staff. Doctors are running low on formula for newborn babies and in some cases giving them water alone. And at least 3 major hospitals lack the nutritional fluids needed to properly treat malnourished children and adults. Those scenes were described in interviews starting Friday with 7 doctors, 4 from Gaza, and 3 volunteers from Australia, Britain, and the United States. All of them worked this past week in 4 of the territory's main hospitals. After months of warnings, international agencies, experts, and doctors say starvation is now sweeping across Gaza amid restrictions on aid imposed by Israel for months. At least 56 Palestinians died this month of starvation in the territory. Nearly half of the total such deaths since the war began 22 months ago, according to data released on Saturday by the Gaza Health Ministry. As starvation rises, medical institutions and staff already struggling to treat war wounds and illnesses are now grappling with rising cases of malnourishment. Weak and dizzy, medics are passing out in the wards where colleagues revive them with saline and glucose strips. Persistently short of basic tools such as antibiotics and painkillers, doctors are also running out of the special intravenous drips used to feed depleted patients. In all 4 hospitals, the doctors describe how they are increasingly unable to save malnourished babies and are instead forced to simply manage their decline. The babies are too weak to be flooded with nutrients, which could overload their system and cause them to suffer refeeding syndrome, which could kill them. In some cases, the fluids that the doctors can safely give to the babies are not enough to prevent them from dying. I have seen ones that are imminently about to pass away, said Dr. Amberine Salimi, an American surgeon who has been volunteering since early July at the Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza. The babies were brought to the hospital starving and malnourished, Dr. Salimi said in a phone interview on Friday, and they haven't been able to get them back from the brink. Dr. Nick Maynard, a British surgeon who volunteered at the same hospital until Wednesday, described the shock of seeing a skeleton infant who looked only days old, but was in fact 7 months. The expression of skin and bones doesn't do it justice, Dr. Maynard said in a phone interview on Friday. I saw the severity of malnutrition that I would not have thought possible in a civilized world. This is a man made starvation being used as a weapon of war, and it led to many more deaths unless food and aid is let in immediately. As for comment, the CGAT, the Israeli military department that oversees aid to Gaza, said, quote, it continues to work in a coordination with international actors to allow and facilitate the continued entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip in accordance with international law. Late on Saturday night, the Israeli military began to drop airborne aid over northern Gaza and said it would pause its military activity for several hours a day in key areas to make it easier to deliver aid by land. One third of Palestinians in Gaza are forced to go without food for days in a row, the World Food Program said recently. Of the young children and pregnant women treated at clinics run by Doctors Without Borders in Gaza, roughly one third are suffering from malnutrition, the medical group said last week. The result is a rise in infection, dehydration, and even immune collapse in infants, said Dr. Hani Al-Falit, a pediatric consultant at Al-Qasar Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza. The immediate cause of death in some of the cases is simple. The baby doesn't get enough to eat, and neither does the mother. Starvation has risen sharply since Israel's total blockade of food aid to Gaza began early March and late May, doctors and rights groups say. While Israel has since allowed food in, it introduced a new method of distribution that is flawed and dangerous, making it almost impossible for Palestinians to find food safely or affordably. Before March, food handouts were mainly distributed under a UN-led system from hundreds of points close to where people live. Now they are supplied from a handful of sites run by Israeli-backed private American contractors that, for most Palestinians in Gaza, can be reached only by walking for miles through Israeli military lines. Israeli soldiers have killed hundreds of people walking these routes, turning the daily search for food into a deadly trap. So again, if you want to hear more about this story, head on over to the New York Times. They're doing a great article on this as well. So let's get into the next one. This is from The Guardian. And it says a Swiss film about a nurse pushed to her limits one night is being praised for the picture it paints of treacherously underfunded healthcare. The director talks about the heart-pounding story that inspired her. The world could face a shortage of 13 million nurses by the end of this decade. For her new film, Swiss director Petra Volpi imagined the consequences of just one missed shift on a busy night at a hospital and found herself making a disaster movie. With Late Shift, Volpe aimed to shine a light on the front lines of the looming healthcare catastrophe through the eyes of a dedicated, exhausted Floria. Played by German actor Leonie Benisch, the young nurse shows an initially acrobatic grace in her workday, whose first half resembles a particularly hectic episode of the restaurant kitchen series The Bear, but with life and death stakes. Arriving for a shift cheery and energetic and taking time to ask about her colleague's recent holiday, Floria soon hears that another nurse has called in sick. The looming workload suddenly grows exponentially, compounding the stress and driving up the likelihood she will make a fatal mistake. The Swiss-born Volpe says she chose the film's German title, Hilden, Heroine, because it took a mythic term often reserved for warriors and applied it to the bravery and self-sacrifice of care work. This work, which is extremely complex and emotionally charged, is completely devalued in our societies. I find it very symptomatic because it's women's work. 80% of the people in many countries who do this work are female. Volpe was inspired by a long-time roommate who worked as a nurse, and by the autobiographical novel Our Profession is Not the Problem, It's the Circumstances by German former care worker Madeline Kavalaj, who advised her on the script. My heart was pounding from this first chapter, and I thought to myself, this reads like a thriller. But within that stress, you find the most tender human moments. The film revolves around the escalating and competing needs of patients on a hospital ward with a different set of medical and emotional demands lurking behind each door, signaled to the staff by a shrieking call bell. Benishi's turbo-driven career has already included roles on The Crown and Berlin, as well as the film parts in Michael Haneke's The White Ribbon. Munich Olympics attacks drama September 5th, and the German Oscar nominated Teacher's Lounge. She says a common thread in her most recent characters is people who burn for what they do. But she notes it was a rare in TV medical dramas to see nurses and their everyday feet front and center. You're used to getting the physicians as the heroes, and then the backdrop, a nurse might be hanging an infusion bag, or drink a coffee, or have an affair with the senior doctor. Yeah, yep. We're not gonna mention any shows or right, Grey's Anatomy. Yeah, yeah. Before this wasn't clear to me how much of the actual medical responsibility rests on the nurse's shoulders. Benish, who trained at London's Guildhall School of Music and Drama, said she spent several shifts trailing real nurses at a Swiss hospital to learn the choreography of interactions between staff and patients and the manual skills of prepping a syringe or taking blood pressure. I wanted real nurses not to be able to tell the difference between me and a professional, she says. I just hope people aren't scared off by a film with subtitles because the story is absolutely universal. And actually, when I saw this article, which is one of the reasons why I brought it out, it's like I really wanted to see it because we praise shows like The Pit, which shows what's going on in the ER, and we have wonderful nurse characters there. But I often wonder what would it be like to have the actual to show actually what happens with nurses and what we have to deal with, and have cameras follow us like a reality TV show. And I know there was one years ago, but there's so much that people don't see and don't know. And as one of my colleagues wrote in an article on LinkedIn, he talked about being a nursologist and the study of the practice of nursing, and the fact that nursing is its own discipline. And we do have our own research, and we do have our own theories, and we do have our own voice. And so now we need to use it. And so I'm excited about this project, and I thought this would be great to see. So if I ever get a chance to see it, I want to be able to see it. It says at the world premiere at the Berlin Film Festival in February, several nurses were invited to appear in their uniforms on the red carpet and take the stage after the screening for a round of applause. Days before Germany's general election, some were held, I don't know what it says, winds in floor. We are Floria signs. Oh, that's nice. Okay. One of those guests was Ingio Bjoing, I hope I said this right, who worked for hospitals for a quarter of a century and is now on staff at the German Association of Nursing Professionals, which lobbies for better conditions for care workers. It was incredibly moving, he said of the film gala. Watching several of the scenes, I thought, wow, that's really how it is. So it's called Late Shift. There looks like there is a trailer on YouTube, and so I might head on over and check it out. There's more to this story that's coming, so I'm excited about it. I want to see what happens with this, and we'll go on. So go ahead over to the Guardian to hear the rest of the story. We're just running short on time here because I want to get to some good news here. We get to some good news. I'm excited about this. But before we do that, let's take another break. Nurses, are you burnt out, frustrated, looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at the nursesharkacademy.biz today. All right, let's go ahead and get to our last two stories because I like to share things about our nurses making a difference, and I actually have two. So let's start off with this one. Um, yeah. Or actually, I have one story. Sorry. One story, nurse making a difference. Here we go. This is from nurse.org, which I love their content. They did great work at nurse.org. So shout out to nurse.org. But with a bit of bittersweet emotions here, we want to say goodbye and thank you to America's first family nurse practitioner, Martha Schwebeck, dies at age 86. So because of this, I want to show her. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to actually show the screen. All right, here we go. So we have, this is her picture. So I thought, you know what? Let's show her picture. I like to show their faces. So the nursing world recently lost an icon with the passing of Martha Schwebeck, recognized as the first family nurse practitioner in the United States. While her name might not be on the tip of everyone's tongue, her impact is woven into the daily lives of over 355,000 nurse practitioners practicing across the country. Fun fact, family practice remains the most popular specialty among NPs, and we have to thank Schwebeck for laying the groundwork. Martha Schwebeck's career began in the 1960s, a time when nursing was undergoing a major transformation. Picture this, physician shortages were at an all-time high, especially in rural and underserved areas. Communities desperately needed a solution, and nurses, as always, stepped up. This was when the first formal nurse practitioner program launched at the University of Colorado in 1965, initially focusing on pediatric care. Schwebeck, however, saw an even bigger picture. She helped shape the idea of a family nurse practitioner, a role that could serve patients of all ages. Think of her as a Florence Nightingale of advanced practice nursing, but with a stethoscope slung over her shoulder and a vision for community-wide care. Fast forward to today, and NPs provide over 1 billion patient visits annually in the U.S. Research consistently shows that NPs deliver care on par with physicians when it comes to outcomes. Plus, the patients often rate their satisfaction with NPs even higher. What made Schwebeck's vision so revolutionary was the focus on family practice. Unlike niche specialties, FNPs are trained to care for patients across the lifespan. From newborns to great-grandparents, the family nurse practitioner is everyone's go-to. This comprehensive approach was a game changer, particularly for rural communities where access to specialists was and still is sometimes a pipe dream. Today, around 70% of all nurse practitioners are certified in family practice. Consider that for a moment, 7 out of the 10 NPs are walking in the footsteps of Martha Schwebeck, carrying on her mission to provide whole family care. That's a legacy worth celebrating. Of course, the NP role has evolved significantly since Schwebeck's time. Back then, NP education was more like a certificate program. Today, nurse practitioners must earn a graduate level degrees, and the doctor of nursing practice is becoming the gold standard. Not to mention, 28 states now grant NPs full practice authority, allowing them to diagnose, treat, and prescribe meds without needing a physician cosign. At its core, Schwebeck's work emphasized what we as nurses already know. Our practice is about more than just treating symptoms. It's about promoting health, preventing illness, educating patients, and being a solid rock of support that they can lean on. She helped establish a model of care that was equal parts clinical expertise and human connection, a philosophy that remains central to NP practice today. Her story is also a reminder that the nursing intervention often springs from necessity. The NP role was born out of a need to fill gaps in care. And while we've come a long way, those gaps are still likely still there. Provider shortages across access disparities and changing healthcare demands continue to be a reported challenge to us. But Shrivak showed us nurses are more than capable of rising to meet those needs. Whether you're a student nurse just learning about advanced practice roles, a seasoned NP, or somewhere in between, Martha Shrivak's legacy is likely woven into your work. She believed in making care accessible to everyone, regardless of zip code or income bracket. So the next time you're caring for a patient in a rural clinic or counseling a family with a newborn and a senior in the same visit, take a moment to think of Shrivak. She paved the way for all of us, and while she may no longer be with us, her influence will continue to guide the nursing profession for generations to come. All right. So there you have it. Um, that was our nurse making a difference. Let me go ahead and stop the sharing. I want to thank you for tuning in this week for what's been happening. There's a lot of good stuff that's going on that we'll be having in the upcoming month or so. So, first of all, don't forget to, if you like this channel, go ahead and subscribe. And also, don't forget our other show, the Nurse Shark Academy show, where we interview nurse business owners and leaders and invite them to tell their story. And then we also have added, just so you know, we've added for our patrons, those who are supporters of that show, you can become a patron by going to our Podbean and registering as a patron. So go to our link on Podbean, and I'll be happy to share that with you and post that later on. But if you go to there, you can become a patron, and you have special content for our patrons. So I put in special episodes where I talk about some leadership tips and things that you'll need for business. And then as we get more patrons, I'll start inviting guests who are experts in their field to talk to our members who are happen to be there. So if you join the Nurse Shark Academy as a member, and or if you join us as a patron on the show, you'll get access to those behind the scenes things as well. Also, I wanted to share with you that at Baxter Professional Services HealthEducation.com, we do have our TB classes, CPR classes, all those things that are happening for next month and the next quarter. So pay attention to that as well. So head on over to Baxter Professional Services HealthEducation.com. And also, we just wrapped up our break free event for today, but don't worry, we'll be having an encore break free event around in September. And so we'll be doing that event as well. So look forward to our break free event in September. And then we'll see you again. All right. So keep an eye on what's happening on NurseSharkAcademy.biz and Baxter Professional Services HealthEducation.com. You can always find our great content there and what classes and trainings we have coming up. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you not next week. Just don't forget, next week we will not have a live. We may have something, but we will not have a live because I will be otherwise engaged. But following that, we'll be right back here, give you the news and what's happening in healthcare every week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.